Berserker is a specialization that hasn't been too popular recently because the defense trait line, which works very well with it, has been nerfed pretty heavily because it had a lot of passives in it, and the balance philosophy has been adopted to move away from short cooldowns on passive traits. So defense doesn't really work too well with Berserker anymore unless you run stances. And if you run stances, well, that kind of pigeonholes you. And while that's good in World versus World, stances are nerfed in PvP. So I made a build that a couple months ago for Warrior in PvP that's kind of similar to this with Shouts and the Warhorn. But for World versus World roaming, I adapted the build a little bit for more mobility and more damage and burst. So the idea is basically you have sword with a lot of condies, and then you have the leg specialist trait, which allows you to immobilize a target to land your full combo, which kind of lasts like a second anyways. And then once you've got your whole combo burst on them, you just kind of like kite away and let your condies tick. So let's go over the traits. I take Tactics, Discipline, Berserker. In Tactics, you're going to have Leg Specialist, obviously, which gives you Immobilize whenever you cripple a target. You have Cripple on Savage Leap. You have it on Impale. And you also have it on your final auto attack chain. And you'll also have it on Sundering Leap. So it's a 12-second ICD, so you're not going to get too much value out of it. But it is nice when it is going to occur because you don't really have any hard CC on this build, so landing all of your burst on a target is pretty hard because they can always decide when they want to dodge. So it is pretty essential to this build. And then there's not much power synergy on this build. It's mainly just condies, so the damage increase doesn't matter, and neither does this trait. You also have Shrug It Off, which is a very good trait. It's a 20-second cooldown. Whenever you have one condition on you, so basically the first condition you get on you is going to be removed by a heal kind of shout, and it will also break stun. So if the first thing that hits you is a CC that puts a condition on you, it'll stun break that. So like if a thief is running the trait that gives them poison when they're in stealth, and then they steal to you and put poison on you, you'll break stun the daze because it removes the condition, but it also breaks stuns. Or any other kind of skill that'll give you conditions and also CC you. There's a lot of skills like that. So this adds a lot of kind of like CC resistance to the build, and actually makes up for the fact that I've only got one ability that is a stun break on my utility bar. And then you have Mending Might. Whenever you apply Might to an ally, it'll heal you. So for Great Justice, gives 12 Might to nearby allies, and this will give healing for each stack and each target. So it can heal for quite a bit. And you also get Might by just swapping weapons or landing your burst skill. But yeah, it's some nice sustain. And then you have Vigorous Shouts. This will reduce the recharge of shout skills. You have 3 shouts plus the passive shout, and it will give 1.5k healing to all allies affected by those shouts. So it gives you quite a bit of sustain to fill the gap between your heal skill and your might applications, and it'll also kind of like support your allies, which is nice. And it'll also give you healing power based on your power, but as I said, you don't really get any power. Healing power is really nice because it scales really heavily with this trait, but because the application of those traits isn't that often, you don't want to invest too much into healing power. So I don't go too much into healing power. So I don't need to go into power just to get that extra convert. And then in Discipline, you have Versatile Rage and Fast Hands, reducing your weapon swap cooldown to 5 seconds. Really important for proccing your swap sigils off cooldown, because your weapon swap is a 5-second cooldown, and your sigils are like a 9-second cooldown. So you can basically get them off cooldown by just swapping weapon off cooldown. And then you'll also get adrenaline every time you swap. So you're getting a lot of adrenaline, and you don't need to hit or be hit to gain it. So you're just gaining adrenaline over time no matter what when you're in combat if you're just swapping weapons, which is really important. Then you have Warrior Sprint, which gives you 25% movement speed while in your melee weapon, and it removes Immobilize when you use a leap skill. So you have Savage Leap and Sundering Leap, and that's nice for allowing you to not get locked down by immobilizes and not have to use your Condi Cleanse necessarily to remove it. And you can use Crack Shot because, yeah, I am using Longbow, and while you're in the Longbow, you're not gaining the 25% movement speed, but you will gain swiftness in this build, so it's not that necessary to have, 25% movement speed from some other source. And the burning on your auto attack isn't really that important because I'm just using my burst skills mostly and then kiting. I'm not really using my auto attack too much in Longbow. I'm swapping weapon rather than that, right? So that's not too important. The recharge reduction on Longbow skills could be good, but since the playstyle is more around bursts and not just spamming out skills off cooldown, it's not too important. And yeah, just Warrior Sprint is just really good for keeping you mobile and slippery. And it also lets you choose another rune, right? Because then you don't have to run a rune that gives you 25% movement speed, and you can get the rest of your movement speed from Burst Mastery. So then you have Brawler's Recovery, which will give you a Condition Cleanse whenever you swap weapons, just pretty nice because that's 5-second cooldown weapon swap. So it's at 4-second. So yeah, you got Condi Cleanse pretty often. And then you have Versatile Power, giving you Might whenever you use or whenever you swap weapons, which will heal you a little bit and give you some condition damage. And then it'll recharge your burst skills 15% faster, which is really good because when you do use your burst skills, you want to be using them in succession and getting a lot of damage in a short window of time. So generally you'll swap weapons, and then you'll use the other one, and then you'll swap weapons, and then you'll use the first one, and by the time you get to the first one again, you're going to want that to be off cooldown, so it is nice. And your burst can only fit during the window of your Berserk ability, which has a limited time, so you do want to fit in as many as possible, so it's nice. And then you also have Burst Mastery, which is going to refund some of the adrenaline that you use when you use a burst skill, which allows you to make the most out of Versatile Power as well, and it gives you swiftness whenever you burst, so it allows you to gain swiftness in Longbow. Then you have the Berserker Traitline. This gives you access to different burst skills, so your Longbow burst skill changes into a really good kind of like ground AoE that's, instead of like being like a huge circle, it becomes a line in front of you, which is really good for Zerg gameplay. And another thing is it's not a projectile, the Scorched Earth, so it doesn't get countered by projectile reflects, so it's really nice. And there is a lot of projectiles on this build, so thieves can steal from you and get a reflect and stuff like that. So if you're vulnerable to projectile reflect on this build, it is one way or one skill that you can kind of fill in the gap while the enemy is invulnerable to projectiles. And then your sword burst will become a kind of like forward projectile. So like this is a projectile too. There's so many projectiles, and you can use this while not facing the target as well, and it does a lot of burning if it hits, and it'll block projectiles. So your burst skills change, and how they work is you can't use them until you go into Berserk mode, which requires all of your adrenaline, And then while you are in Berserk mode, you will only require 10 adrenaline to use each burst skill. So it allows you to use them more quickly, but you have to build it up and gain all that adrenaline first to get to that point. So Savage Instinct will give you a break stun whenever you enter Berserk mode, and it reduces incoming damage, physical damage, by 100%. So it's like a mini Endure Pain for 2 seconds after you use your Berserk skill. And this is very good because a lot of times when someone jumps on you, you want to use your Berserk and then go into like counter pressure and like heavy, damage mode. And having that reduction on damage and stun break at the same time allows you to counter pressure very quickly, and just through the playstyle it feels very good, this trait. And obviously having an extra stun break is good because, as I said, Shake It Off is your only stun break, and then obviously you have a passive stun break on Shrug It Off, so it doesn't feel like you're lacking on stun breaks. But yeah, this is a really good trait. And then you have Burst of Aggression. Whenever you go into Berserk mode, you'll gain super speed and quickness. So you want to be shooting out skills immediately because you can take advantage of that super speed and quickness. Then you have Dead or Alive. So Dead or Alive increases the healing that you receive by 10%, which is nice for your sustain. And it will make all of your shouts heal you more and stuff like that. So it does improve your sustain quite a bit. But also, if you take fatal damage or basically die while you are in Berserk mode, instead of going into downstate, it will just remove you from Berserk and heal you for 5,000. So it's a really good trait for keeping you alive, and it's a 30-second cooldown. So if it procs and then you kind of like kite away, you can still kind of like get it by the time your next Berserk is up or the one after that. So it is a lot of sustain for this build. And then you have Fatal Frenzy. This will give you 300 condition damage and 300 power when you're in Berserk mode, but it'll remove 300 toughness. So you are a bit squishy when you are in Berserk mode, but you also have a lot of toughness on this build already. So you do lose toughness, but it's not to the point where you're feeling really squishy because of it. So it's fine. And then you have King of Fires, which increases the duration of burning you apply by 10%, and you will gain Fire Aura whenever you critically hit an enemy. I have a little bit of precision in this build, so I can proc this every 15 seconds. And Berserker skills, which are basically any skill that you can only use if you're a Berserker. So like the Berserk mode is a skill. The Berserk bursts are Berserk skills. Sundering Leap, and if I had like Torch skills it would be that, but yeah, only my burst skills and Sundering Leap count. And this is a really good trait because when it detonates that Fire Aura, when you use that Berserk skill, you do like a 3 stack of burn for 4 seconds around you, and that can be procced very easily with your Sundering Leap. So if you use Sundering Leap with your Berserk Burst here, you will gain a Fire Aura by leaping through it, and then because it's a burst skill, it'll immediately detonate that. So it gives you the aura and detonates it with the same skill. You can also get a Fire Aura from your Leap on Sword, and then you'd have to detonate it with either Sundering Leap or your actual burst skills. So it kind of, the flow of the build is kind of nice to be aggressive and get that extra burning. And you'll also just get some burns sometimes just randomly from critting, right, with the 15% cooldown. So I like King of Fires. And if you took Eternal Champion, you'd gain 300 toughness while in Berserk mode. But it doesn't really give you much else because the might on Stun Break and the stability on Stun Break is kind of rare. It's very low impact in my opinion. So I like King of Fires to add to the burst damage. So I take full Trailblazer Trinkets. That's the easy part, because you want toughness, you want condition damage, and you want expertise. You want that condition duration. And the vitality is kind of okay, but you don't really need vitality, so I just take a little bit more. You know, I have 22,000 HP. That's a decent amount. And then on my armor, I take Settlers, which is main stat toughness and healing power and condition damage. So you don't want that extra vitality from Trailblazers, and you want a little bit of healing power. So I go for Settlers and the extra toughness instead of the extra healing power, because obviously you go into Berserk mode, you lose a lot of toughness. So I make up for it with Settlers. And then on my weapons, I take Seraph, which has healing power and condition damage, just like Settlers, but instead of toughness, I gain precision and concentration. The boon duration isn't amazing. You can take advantage of it, though, with some of the might and fury uptime and a little bit of swiftness, but it's generally only 7% anyways. I just want it for a little bit of precision, so I have 15% crit chance to allow me to proc King of Fires, right? Because you have to crit to get that fire aura. So I just changed my weapons for Seraph, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So the runes that I use are Antitoxin. They give you more condition damage, and they increase every condition cleanse you do by 1. So whenever I swap weapons, I cleanse a condition. Now that cleanses 2. I use Shake It Off. I cleanse 4 conditions. Now that cleanses 5. Whenever I swap to my cleansing sigil, that cleanses 3. Well, now it cleanses 4. But since I swap weapons to use my cleansing sigil, it's also using Brawler's Recovery, which is another 2 Condi cleanse. So I haven't really tested it, whether it's 5 Condi cleanse or 6 Condi cleanse, because it would be like proccing 2 Condi cleanse at the same time. So you give 2 extra Condi cleanse. But I don't think it really matters that much, because it's either 5 or 6 Condi cleanse, which is pretty much a full Condi cleanse. And yeah, it's just really good because it allows you to save your Shake It Off, to not use it for Condi cleanse all the time. Sometimes you can use it for stun break, and if you need the extra Condi cleanse, then you do have Shake It Off. But like having a full Condi cleanse with cleansing sigil every 10 seconds, or basically every time you swap into sword, is just good. Cleansing energy right on your sword set, because energy is nice. You can do like triple dodges sometimes, just to allow you to fill in the gap between your other stuff. It's your kiting weapon. You're going to see energy cleansing on basically every build, I think, because there's going to be a damage weapon and then like a utility weapon, and then the utility weapon usually has energy cleansing. But you could take other stuff like Torment Sigil, but I'm not critting that much, so it's up to you. I like energy. It's just reliable. Extra dodges is always going to be nice. And then on the Longbow, I have Geomancy Doom. So whenever you swap to the weapon, you're going to bleed enemies near you in an AoE. 3 bleeds. Pretty decent duration on those bleeds, so it does a lot of damage. And then you'll also do 3 poison to one of those because of the Doom Sigil. And how the build works is, oftentimes you are in melee when you're using your Longbow swap, because what you'll do is you'll go into sword, and then you'll get in melee range, then you'll swap and use Fan of Fire. And Fan of Fire is way better in melee range, and it's one of the strongest skills on the Longbow. So generally, yeah, you want to do like this kind of like swap combo that I'll talk about later, and it just kind of flows better for you to have that swap sigil in there, because it adds a lot of burst to your combo. Another thing to mention is Antitoxin will not improve Condi cleanses to your allies. You only really have Shake It Off, which will still cleanse 4 Condis, but it won't cleanse 5 from them. It'll only cleanse 5 from you. And for the food, I take the peppercorn and veggie flatbread. So it gives you more condition damage and expertise, and it'll give you reduced damage by 10%. So it's kind of nice. This build has a lot of condition removal on it, so you don't need to go for more of that. So I just go for more physical damage reduction, and you have a lot of toughness on this build already. So yeah, you handle physical builds pretty well. And the maintenance that I use, or the enhancement that I use, is just the compact quality tuning crystals that you get for free from the skirmish chests. So those are kind of nice. They scale off of your toughness and vitality, which you have a decent amount of. The auto attack on the sword is a very fast bleed that will cripple on the final hit. It's not amazing, but the duration of the bleeds are pretty long. Your 2 skill is a leap when detargeting, really good for disengaging and repositioning, and it will cripple, so it will proc the immobilize from leg specialist. The 3 skill is mostly a power skill, but when you get the enemy below 50% HP, it becomes a Condi skill, and they bleed for 6 stacks for 10 seconds. So really high stacks of conditions on the warrior skills here, but there's not a lot of application of them. So you hit this once and it does a lot of bleed, but if they cleanse it, then it's like it doesn't really get much else. Then you'll see that as well with Impale, kind of. You kind of just throw it out, it's a projectile, and then it sticks into the target and pulses Cripple and Torment, but that's pretty much it. You can pull the Impale out, and it has a long duration on the Torment, but if they cleanse it after they've all pulsed out, then yeah, it's gone. But yeah, you can pull it out, and it will give you might and do a decent amount of power damage, even if you're not, like, I'm not into power at all. But the might can be good if you can time it near the end of the Impale, because you remove the Torment, right? So if you can get it out like after the 4th one, after the 5th you can't pull it out, and that'll get you more damage on all of your conditions. So that can be good, but generally, yeah, you just want to put the Impale in, and that'll cripple as well, so that can proc leg specialist. Then you have Riposte. This is a 3-second block, and if you are hit in melee range while you are blocking, you will attempt a counterattack, and that will do 8 bleeding for 10 seconds. So once again, high stacks, low application, and you gain adrenaline if you're not hit, and you can also make that adrenaline happen faster by just clicking it again, but you get only 3 adrenaline that way. And this is good for blocking range attacks because it doesn't remove the block animation for the counterattack unless you're in melee range. And you can even prolong the block if you use your jump while blocking, and it will not put you into the attack animation because you can't start another animation while jumping or while in the air. So you can kind of like maintain your block if the attack that hits you in melee range happens while you're in the air. And then on your longbow, you have an auto attack that is pretty long range. It's going to hit twice, so it's nice for adrenaline, but otherwise it doesn't really do much else because we don't have the crack shot to give it burning. Fan of Fire, though, is your bread and butter skill for the longbow. It's a 6-second cooldown, very short. It does 3 fans, or 3 arrows that create a fan, and it's like a shotgun effect. So the closer you are, the more likely all 3 will hit, and they last for 7 seconds. So if you hit all 3 for 1k burn, that does 7k over 7 seconds. So it's really good. You generally use that after your your sword immobilize when you're in melee range, which will also proc your sigils on top of them. And it also pierces, so it's really good in downstate situations because you can hit multiple targets with it. And then you have Arcing Arrow. This is a blast finisher, pretty slow. It does power damage usually, so you only really use it for the blast. You can blast it in your Scorched Earth if you want to gain some might, or share might to your allies, which would actually heal you because it would give 3 might to each ally. So, mending might would heal you. And that's pretty much the only reason you use it, is for the blast. And then you have Smoldering Arrow. Smoldering Arrow is a blind projectile which has count recharge on it. So 3 count recharge. So you can use this quite a bit, no cooldown other than the count recharge. And it's just really nice because the blind helps you peel for yourself in between your cooldowns. And it is also a 100% physical projectile, which means if you use it in your Scorched Earth, it will be a burn. So it'll deal some damage while also blinding. So that's nice. And then you have Pin Down. Pin Down's also a physical projectile, but it does a 6 stack of bleed for 15 seconds, really long duration. You can see if that doesn't get cleansed, it does over 10,000 damage with some might. And it does a 4-second immobilize, which is really long. So this skill is amazing for setting up combos, but it is kind of hard to land because it's a very telegraphed attack and it's a slow moving projectile. So you want to usually use that at mid-range, not at someone who's at max range, because you're not going to hit them unless they're standing still. And those are pretty much the skills that you use for the weapons. So there's like a combo that I generally do. So either I will try to impale them from range, which will immobilize them and put a ton of torment on them, or if that misses, I will go for a Savage Leap. I mean, either way I'll do a Savage Leap in. So I'll either do this from range, or I'll try to Savage Leap first, and then I will do the Impale, and then I'll swap to Longbow and immediately use the Fan of Fire while they're immobilized. And as you can see, that does a lot of conditions right there. So that's the main burst combo, is you immobilize with either Impale or Savage Leap, and then you follow in with Impale into swap into your Fan of Fire, and that puts off a decent amount of condies that is going to make it hard for them to cleanse all of them, and it will deal a really good amount of damage if they don't cleanse them. So that's pretty much the main combo that you'll do when you swap weapons. Now you have the primal burst skills as well, which you kind of use to fill in the gap between that sort of like bread and butter combo. So you have your Scorched Earth, which you'll use, and then you'll swap between your sword, and then you use Flaming Flurry, and then you'll keep swapping. You keep getting all this adrenaline back, and you're just popping in those projectiles when you've got Scorched Earth, and then you keep using Flaming Flurry. So as you can see there, I've upkept quite a bit of damage while doing that combo, and then while I'm waiting for my adrenaline and my primal burst to be up again, I just do that basic combo where I just Fan of Fire into melee range. And then you get your burst again. I'll show that off again. You Scorched Earth, you try to do projectiles into that, and then you swap as often as possible because that'll get you the most bursts off as possible. And as I said before, your Scorched Earth gives you a fire field, so you want to be using your projectiles in that. Your Flaming Flurry gives you projectile block, so it's really good versus rangers, and you can use it in any direction, so you can kite very easily with it. And then you're going to want to just do your normal combo as normal, and that'll get you your adrenaline. And yeah, that's pretty much what you're going to do. The utilities are To the Limit. To the Limit is a very good heal skill because it gives you full adrenaline, which allows you to get to your primal burst as soon as possible, and it will also give you 100 endurance, so you can double dodge and then use it and then double dodge again, and you've also got your primal burst. So really good, and it gives it to your allies, and it's a shout, so it heals and gives them endurance, so it's really good. Then you have Shake It Off. This is a shout, gives you and your allies 4 Condi Cleanse, stun breaks you, but it's on a very long count recharge of 60 seconds. So you're going to want to save it. You don't want to waste it for stun break all the time because you have Shrug It Off and your Berserk mode to give you stun breaks. Then you have Sundering Leap. Sundering Leap is a really good skill that's not really seen too much play because it can seem underwhelming, but I have a lot of traits that allow it to be more impactful. So because it's a leap, it removes immobilize. Because it's a cripple, it will immobilize as well. And it's really good with Scorched Earth because it counts as a Berserk skill and a leap finisher. So you will basically leap into it, get the fire field, and then detonate the fire field at the same time and give out tons of burning. So it's really good for that, and just in general, giving you another leap skill on top of Savage Leap allows you more mobility and repositioning, and to feel, you know, like you have more control over your character. And then you have for Great Justice, that is a Fury and Might shout that will give a lot of might to your allies, so it'll heal you and them. And then it gives you a little bit of Fury to allow you to proc your King of Fires, so you're at like 35% crit chance, which is nice. And then you have Battle Standard. Battle Standard is the big playmaking skill. You're going to want to be using this to secure kills because what it does is there's 2 reticles here. There's an outer ring and then there's an inner ring. Anything within the outer ring, which also includes the inner ring, will be revived, but anything within the inner ring will be stomped. So you can do a lot of plays with that. It can be blinded and aegis, so you want to be careful of that. You can remove blind but Shake It Off beforehand or during the cast. And Aegis, you're going to maybe want to have like a ticking Scorched Earth. But in general, this is a very good skill for making like those down situations less complicated because you just finish them off and get it over with. And like when you're outnumbered, a lot of times they just res, right? And this prevents that kind of like impasse where it's like, well, yeah, I can kill one of them, but they're just going to res. So it's kind of like, it's a nice skill. And it'll also pulse Fury, Swiftness, and Might, which over time will give you some healing because of the might it's giving to you and your allies. The Swiftness is nice to supplement your Burst Mastery Swiftness. And the Fury is also good. And then you want to cast it. It's a 2-second cast, which is kind of long. You want to be kiting while doing that. And then what you want to do is when you think that you're not going to be making use of the boons around it anymore, you want to pick it up, and that will reduce the recharge by 60 seconds. So it's instead of a 3-minute cooldown, it's a 2-minute cooldown, which allows you to use it more often, even though that's not too important because you generally save this skill for those key moments anyways, which don't happen every 2 minutes normally. But yeah, if you do want to pick it up, pick it up. So generally when I go into an encounter, this is what I'll do. I'll try to like get in combat and use Impale or whatever, and then I will give myself my full heal if it's not like a dangerous situation. It's a trade-off. If I think that it's going to be dangerous, then I don't use my heal immediately and save it till I've taken some damage. But if I'm going to be super aggressive, I'll use my heal immediately once I get into combat, right? You don't want to use your heal out of combat because then you just lose the adrenaline. And then I'll just immediately go into melee range, swap to Fan of Fire, and then go into Berserk mode and Scorched Earth. Use the 4, wait till they dodge, pin down, maybe use a Scorched Earth again, and as soon as I use my second Fan of Fire, swap, go into Flaming Flurry. My Impale might be off cooldown again, and then I'll use another Flaming Flurry and then swap. And you'll also increase the duration of your Berserk mode when you land your Sundering Leap. So that's kind of good by 5 seconds. So if you do want to use that in Berserk mode with your Scorched Earth, it'll reward you by allowing you to be in your Berserk mode longer. And yeah, you want to use your Berserk skill and then like immediately swap so you can use the other one, and you've got like so much adrenaline coming in because of the discipline trait line that you can spam these out a lot and upkeep your pressure on the target. And if you do get the kill, then you can battle standard and then reset, and then by then you've got your adrenaline probably coming up again soon. And that's kind of how the flow of the build works. So this is a blob fight that we're going to be interrupting here. I jump in immediately on the lowest target I can see and blow my primal burst after using my heal skill to cleave it out. I'm looking around for whatever kills I can tag with my long range Scorched Earth, which is really good in these large scale fights, to just tag as many things as possible. And then I realized that the Zerg fight is starting to head in one direction, right? One of the teams is starting to win, so we need to back off a little bit because we'll start getting aggro from the entire Zerg. And then we get it down and the Zerg starts to go on us, so I immediately go for the banner as I'm kiting away and I just get out of there. I do try to counter pressure this Mesmer who chased me, but that was a huge mistake because I did not think that their whole Zerg would be on me that quickly. So I'm kiting up this terrain and I do a little bit of a fake leap off, so I juke quite a few of them off. And I'm just trying to survive while doing as much damage as possible to see if I'll get a kill on that thief and maybe rally me, but no, there's too many and I'm gonna die. But that kind of shows how you want to play with your bursts and kite in between them and then use your mobility to survive. The second clip is going to be versus a Power Rev and a Soul Beast. My build has a lot of toughness on it, but I have to be careful during my Primal Burst because I lose toughness. So I know that the Rev is actually the easiest target, but I decide to go on the Ranger because they're pressuring me the hardest. So you have to make a decision there between what you can kill or what you want to get off of you the most. And sometimes that can be a hard decision, and probably should have gone for the Rev here to be honest, but I get res, and the residual conditions actually allow me to get the Ranger down, and at this point we can pretty much get the kill because I have so much down cleave. As you can see here, I'm just spamming so much damage, and that allows us to get the kill on the Ranger. So if you like this kind of video, like and subscribe for more. And we're nearing the end of the build arc here. We just got Scrapper left, and then we're going to move on to something else.